Hey class, today my name is Brian Handelsman, and I will be explaining the recent change, or I guess the very recent changes of the National Electric Code from 2017 up to 2019. I'm going to begin by sharing my screen here. So the National Electric Code is something that has been around for obviously a very long time. The whole point of this code is to be able to create safety and security in the solar or in electrical installers as a whole. But what we're really going to be focusing on is how they've adopted this with solar. So with the National Electric Code, there have been many sections that have been written about PV specifically. And more importantly, the recent adoptions have all been made directly to try everything that they can to make this process safer for the people who are installing and working on these systems, making it safer for the homeowner and for the commercial user and everybody who's using the product, and then also safe for the grid itself, because a lot of these systems do tend to be attached to grid tied. So making sure that, that if someone's coming out to work on a line, that they're not going to be fried because someone has a solar system on is extremely important. So in 2017, the first major change that we see here is changes to Article 690. So Article 690 is the main area that has a lot to focus on with PV systems. The main one right here, and the main reason why 2017 had to look at this is because solar was getting much more mainstream, and they needed to do something to basically keep it safe for everyone who is involved in these systems. So the main thing that this article really deals with, and what 2017 really invested in, is looking into rapid shutdown devices, RSDs, or PV disconnects. So a disconnect or an RSD is a device that basically will separate the PV system from all our other electrical systems on the property. So if we can look at this image here, it actually basically creates a boundary around the arrays. And so if you need to, at any means, turn off your solar array, you can basically turn off this switch, and it will shut down the boundary here and not allow electricity to pass through anymore. The reason why that became so important is because, if you have a lineman that needs to come work on your home and you have a solar system working, before they go up and work on that, they need to make sure that it is not producing electricity anymore, and that electricity is not moving through the system. So having that rapid shutdown system, or the rapid shutdown device, is an easily streamlined way to give the system a singular point to turn off and isolate the system if something went wrong. That was one of the biggest focus there. There were also many other significant changes along here in 2017. The main three changes that I chose to focus on today, there were many of them, but the ones that I'm focusing on is number one, 690-10, whereas adding special conditions that directly deal with energy storage, microgrids, and standalone systems. And they moved those to actually two separate articles, Article 710 and Article 706. And the reason why they moved that one over is because they started realizing that, storage is becoming a much more prevalent product, right? So as we just saw in Texas recently, the grids have been struggling. I mean, if something goes down and somebody has someone with a heart condition or something to where they need power in the backup situation, then batteries are really the only way to do that. So they also understand, though, that batteries don't just only go with solar systems. So by putting batteries into their own section is creating a new code and a law for how standalone and microgrids and batteries will be used, because that is something that will be coming more into our future moving forward. On top of that, the next one that I'm looking at is 690-41 and 690-42, which introduces functional grounding and required ground fault protection. So this is what this image is actually showing here. So we'll just take a look at this real quick. So here's your PV arrays over here. Right now, as you can see, here's basically your rapid shutdown. So the switch is open right now, so there's obviously no electricity moving through it. Once this closes, the electricity will actually go in the path of least resistance. So that's going to follow this line right here. Over here, this 1A and this piece right here is going to be your ground faults. The reason why those are so important is because if there is like a surge coming through in terms of a voltage surge, you don't want that getting into your system. So it basically gives it another place for that electricity to go On top of that, let's say, one of these wires here loses some insulation or gets chewed up by a bird or a rat or hurt by a hurricane or something, you basically are setting yourself up to have a backup place for this energy to go through. And once the energy starts flowing through this secondary line and it hits the ground fault, it can shut everything down on a moment's notice. So that is really important for these systems as well, to alleviate any future issues with fires or with systems basically charging current through something when it's not actually supposed to, or when there are pieces that are not connected the way that they need to be. Finally, the last piece that I'm looking at is 690.13, which is expanding on and describes the two types of disconnects in a PV system, which includes PV disconnecting means, and then the equipment disconnects. So the PV disconnect is going to mainly be, it's one basically bigger switch and it has been updated recently, but you need to have that within 1 foot of your main meter and of the main inverter system on the home. So that's basically just going to be a big box with a big lever. You pull that lever down, turns off the system, you put the lever up, and it turns on the system. Again, that is super important if linemen need to come out and work on your home, or electricians, so that they can basically isolate and shut down your solar system in one. There are also equipment disconnects. So like your inverters, microinverters are considered to have their own disconnects as well. And if they're certified, microinverters can actually be certified as full-on disconnectors, to where if there was some extra surge going through those microinverters, they will actually shut down themselves as well. And there's abilities to basically turn off your inverters or turn off the solar panels. That's more of what the equipment disconnects are. But most importantly, the main one that we really want to focus on is that PV disconnect, because that's going to isolate the entire array and shut that down from ever, as you can see here, the disconnect, and basically alleviate, no matter which way you go through this line, it will not be able to move because the DC disconnect is off, or the disconnect is off. Why are these things significant? So in terms of the microgrids, it's very important to focus very specifically on these microgrid standalone systems and batteries, because like I said, as we can see with what happened in Texas and Iowa with the derecho, more and more people are going to start being without power. As we see in California, I mean, that's the greatest example here, is that they are literally browning out the state because they don't have enough capacity to handle people. And let's say, there's somebody there that has a heart condition, they need constant power, they need oxygen. And if the city just keeps turning off and on their power, that's insanely dangerous. So being able to make specific laws and electrical codes for batteries directly and really focus in on that side of things is going to create a lot more safety moving forward, because people are going to do it whether or not there are codes or safety involved. So getting ahead of the game and creating these safety standards is insanely important for that. And I think having their own code is really intelligent as well, and I'll kind of delve into that here in a second. In terms of the ground fault, obviously that is so important, just because it will stop the voltage surges from destroying equipment and from hurting the people around it, starting fires, everything like that, and basically give energy a second option if some of the initial wiring becomes less insulated. So as I said, it's really just a safety feature of these systems, and the NEC being able to more streamline and more obviously kind of update what they're looking at in terms of what the needs are for ground faulting is really what they were looking at throughout this document. And then finally, it's very important to distinguish between the PV disconnects and the equipment disconnects, because both are imperative to keep customers and installers safe while building a system. Again, number one, they're a requirement now. So everyone has to have that PV disconnect box, and people understanding that, a PV disconnect box is not an equipment disconnect, and being able to basically distinguish between the two of those is very important for a consumer, because they need to know what they should do. If an electrician's coming out, they should know where their PV disconnect is and how to turn that thing off, so that and then also a lot of times those have automatic transfer switches as well. Like if you're on a grid tied system and you're connected to the grid and the grid goes down and you don't have a battery, you're going to lose your array because of these equipment and these PV disconnects. And that's really good, again, because it's keeping the safety of our workers in mind, so that when that lineman is up there, if you're not producing power and sending power to a grid that is off, because that would absolutely kill that lineman. Finally, the last big thing is going to be a focus on energy storage systems. So with that in mind, the big thing that we're actually looking at is that energy storage and backup systems were moved from the PV section of 690 to its own section of Articles 710 and 706, because there actually have been seen, you can make energy storage without PV. You can make them with hydro, you can make them with flywheels. There's a lot of flow batteries, a lot of different options. So they needed them to be in their own section because it made no sense to have them always with photovoltaics when in reality they can operate without them. The big thing here is that Article 706 really focuses on all storage system types, both AC and DC, including normal storage solution like your lithium ion, Tesla Powerwalls, but then also unconventional options as well, such as flow batteries and flywheels. This right here shows a little idea of a flywheel. And basically what's going to happen with a flywheel is that it will actually work by accelerating a rotor. So as you can see, this rotor is right here, and it will turn that at a very, very high speed to maintain energy in the system. And so basically once it starts spinning, that spinning will keep it moving. It's like a perpetual motion generator. And these things can be used, it doesn't have to be connected to PV to get it started, anything like that. They're actually being used in NASA to help, they're actually being put in some spaceships and stuff like that to be able to get energy in places where you usually can't find that. The reason why that's important to even speak about is because this section really states that to have a battery in a livable dwelling, you need to have 100 volts or less, unless there are no live parts or moving parts involved, then it can be higher. But in the case of a flywheel, there are absolutely moving parts and live parts. I mean, the whole system is a live system. So you really do have to follow along with those codes. And if you basically don't, you're opening yourself up to danger and liability, which is the whole point of these codes, are to stop people from hurting themselves and stop people from hurting, their homes and their livelihood. Finally, just looking at this as a whole, the main scope of this whole energy storage idea is that this section deals with how batteries are categorized as their own topic. And the reason why that is so relevant in our time is, as I've kind of said before, in that the way that the grid is becoming unreliable. And, even if we look way across out of this country, I know we're not dealing with the National Electric Code anymore, but we see there are many other countries out here that don't have working grids. And I mean, our grid is so old that there are very good chances that these grids will start to go down. So really being able to get ahead and get a really good grip on microgrids and how to build systems without using the whole national grid that we have available is going to be really important to society for it to move forward. And the biggest problem is if they didn't, go ahead and make these codes right now, then we would be looking at a total meltdown when the time came, because everyone would be doing, it would be mayhem. There'd be no laws or codes in place at that point, and it could be a lot of people getting hurt, a lot of homes burning down to a point. And that's obviously the whole point of the National Electric Code, is to avoid that. So they really wanted to get these rules in place now. And then as people are going ahead, I mean, I've built myself a standalone system out in Texas, and we have to be very careful following these voltage rules and following the NEC, because I mean, the only reason that these are in place is to streamline this technology, make it more available, more apparent, and to really take the safety and concerns of the people working with the equipment and the homeowners and consumers that are going to be living around these on a daily basis. So that really goes through most of my topic here. Again, I'm Brian Handelsman, and this was a great time talking to you all. Thank you. Bye.